There's a question that has arisen out of the seeming consensus that was reached during our travels. And that consensus was that when love is dead, only love remains. So the question is, what is this love that remains when all of human love, up to and including unconditional love, have played themselves out in our life, have died, so to speak? And to arrive at an awareness, an understanding, even an experience of this, we have to dive deeper. First, there's that old story about the time when Jesus was walking down the road on a pilgrimage with Simon Peter. And they came to a certain town, and when they arrived there, the people gathered together and mocked Jesus along the road, spitting at him, throwing abuse at him, even sticks and stones. But Jesus merely turned around, putting his hands together, blessed the whole throng of people. Simon Peter said to Jesus, "Why did you not scold them? Why did you not teach them?" And Jesus said to Simon Peter, "I can only spend what I have in my purse." And then there are several different stories along the same lines. The first story is about a certain dervish who was with a Sufi master for some time, and the Sufi master was going on a pilgrimage. So the dervish said to the Sufi master, "Master, I need to know the ways of the Sufi. Can I travel with you?" And the Sufi master said, "Yes, you may travel with me on the proviso that you do not question anything that I do." And the dervish readily agreed to this. So they set out on their journey. And they hadn't gotten too far when they had to cross a river. And for that, they had to take a ferry boat. But when they were on the ferry boat crossing, the dervish noticed that the Sufi was bending down. And when he looked, he saw that the Sufi was drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat. And he said to the Sufi, "What are you doing? This boat will sink with all the people on board." The Sufi put up his finger and said, "Remember, you said that you would not question anything that I do." So the dervish had to close his mouth and keep quiet. They went on some distance further, where they came to a town, and when they entered, the people mocked them and threw sticks and stones, and "We don't want you dervishes in our town." And they were ran out of town. But the Sufi master said, "Come, we have a task to do." So he took the dervish, and they found that there was a hole in the walls that protected this town from marauders and bandits. So the Sufi set to and asked his dervish companion to help him to repair the hole in the wall. And the dervish couldn't understand this. These people have been so cruel to us, treated us so badly, and you repair their wall for them. Well, again, the Sufi said to the dervish, remember your promise that you would not ask questions about what was done? And again the dervish had to zip his lip, and on they went further until they came to a kingdom where they were welcomed by the king and treated with great festivity and feasts, and they were invited out on a horse ride with the king and his princeling son, a young boy. Well, when they were out riding, the Sufi rode off with the young princeling and came up beside his horse and knocked him off his horse, so that he fell down and broke his ankle. And the dervish was horrified. How could you do this? This king gave us such great hospitality, and now you have maimed his son? Because in that kingdom it so happened that no prince, no being with a physical handicap could take over the monarchy. Well, again the dervish questioned the Sufi about this, and the Sufi, now they were just walking along the road, said to the dervish, "You promised that you would not question what it is that I did, and 3 times you have questioned the actions that have been taken. You can no longer travel with me. Your promise has been broken. You are not teachable." And with that, before the very eyes of the dervish, the Sufi disappeared in a puff of smoke. And the third story, along similar lines, is the story of the prince. He was very well tutored. He had been taught all the languages of the various countries that were known to his kingdom. He was taught philosophy and poetry and music, the ways of war. He was a well-rounded young man. But it so happened he was walking by a river one day when he saw an old man with a long white beard reading a book as he was walking along the bank of the river. Now the prince was quite curious about this being. He seemed to be somewhat different. So he went over and asked him what book it was that he was reading. And when he looked over the shoulder of the old man, he could see that the book was written in a language that he had no knowledge of at all. So the prince asked the old man, "What book is it, what language is it that you are reading?" And the old man said, "To learn the language of this book, you must accompany me on my travels," which the prince readily did. So the first place that they came to for looking for hospitality and a rest for the night was a very palatial house. And they were invited in by the owner of this house and feasted to a wonderful dinner. But as they were eating their dinner, off the golden plates on which the food was served, the old man took one of the golden plates and hid it under his cloak. The prince was horrified. So when they came out of that place, the prince couldn't help himself but ask the old man, why did you do that?" And the old man held up his finger and said, you want to learn the language of the book that I am reading, then you must keep your peace. So the prince zipped his lip, and the next evening they came to a place where again the house was very opulent, but when they asked for a place to rest for the night, they were sent out to the barn where the animals stayed, and they were given a few crusts of stale bread and some sour wine, and told that they could sleep in the hay where the animals were. Well, the next morning, the old man went to the owner of this house and handed over the golden plate that he'd stolen from the people before, thanked him profusely for his hospitality and the wonderful reception that they had. And of course, the prince could not understand this at all, so he questioned the old man about it. But again, the old man held up his finger and said, "No, no, no, you want to learn the language of my book, you have to keep your silence." So they went on, and this time, seeking hospitality, they came to a great river, and across this river there was a rope bridge that looked very, very precarious. But there was a tiny little inn on their side of the raging river, and this inn was run by an old widow. And this old widow had a nephew who she cared for and who chopped the wood for her and in a way took care of her. And so they were invited in the inn for the night, but the old man said, this bridge is very precarious, are we safe to cross? And the old woman said, "Oh, yes, my nephew will go with you across the bridge. He knows the way very well. Just follow him." And so the next morning they set out, and when they were halfway across the bridge, the old man pushed the young man over the edge so that he fell into the raging torrent below and was carried away. The prince was horrified. How could you do that when we were given hospitality, and this young man was the old woman's only way of being cared for in her old age? The old man again waved his finger at the prince and said, "You asked me what is the language of the book that I was reading. And if you question what I do, there is not a possibility that you will know and learn this language." And with that, before the very eyes of the prince, the old man grew great feathery wings. A great halo appeared around his head, and opening his wings, he flew off, leaving the prince on the precarious rope bridge. The question is, what is it that remains, that is called love, when human love, in all its forms, has been played out, is dead? And what do these stories have to do with our means of being able to experience, know, and understand what this is? What do these stories mean for you relative to the answer to this question. What is this love that remains when all else is dead? What is this place we find ourselves in?